This is a talk about Ascension Tantra Yoga. It's produced by the Unification Organization of Collective Ascension in Australia. Now, what is yoga and what is Ascension Yoga and what is Tantra? You're probably asking, unless you're quite well versed in yoga. Well, the modern system of yoga was developed by a guru who was called Patanjali. Yoga had existed through the Dravidian civilization in India for thousands of years prior to Patanjali. And Patanjali was a guru who lived about the time of Jesus Christ, about 2,000 years ago in southern India, near a city called Chennai, or formerly known as Madras in Tamil Nadu, on the east coast, southeast coast of India. So he developed a system which had 8 stages to it. He basically compartmentalized and put together a lot of the confused teachings through all the texts and Upanishads, all the Hindu textbooks, which described the Hindu religion as we know it as, we call it Hindu, but it wasn't called Hinduism back then. So Patanjali wrote these sutras, and these sutras basically had 8 stages. Stage 1, known as the Yamas, and the Yamas are a series of promises that you make, a series of kind of vows, monastic vows almost, if you like, similar to them, of how you will morally behave and what you will do and what you will not do while you're practicing yoga. And some of them are quite strict, so we'll talk about them shortly. But before you could even start learning yoga with this particular guru, you had to take these vows of how you would live to show that you were sincere to follow this very profound religious path, spiritual path. Once you'd made those promises to the guru and surrendered to him, then he was prepared to teach you, and he would take you under his tuition. Often you would live in his house, which was known as an ashram. And the first thing that he would be teaching would be the postures, what are known as asanas. Those are what everyone learns when they go to a yoga class in Australia. You start straight away on doing the postures. You don't take any vows. You just start immediately learning the postures. So the postures are there because the first thing to purify you so that you were ready to take in the powerful Kundalini energy to experience samadhi, to experience liberation, was the body had to be prepared for it. And for the body to be prepared for it, that energy comes up your spine. So your back, your posture, the main core of your body has to be prepared for that energy. And so due to the way that we live, etc., our posture is usually fairly twisted and bad, and that has to be corrected and realigned, and the postures allow for that correction through doing those flexible bends. And also they don't just work on the spine, they also work on the legs, the arms, neck, and so forth. So that was basically the third thing, the third stage. The fourth step in the progression, after you'd sort of been working on your postures, he'd start to teach you how to control your breathing. And usually that would be combined with doing the postures. How to breathe and the various exercises and controlling the breath. And as the breath is controlled, then the mind starts to be controlled. And when the postures are right and your body's correctly aligned and it's not hunched over or misaligned, and which affects your mind and your thoughts. Once that posture is in a strong, upright position, then the thoughts, the confusion, the depression, the anger, all that starts to calm down, and then you can start focusing on the breathing, known as pranayama, and that's your fourth stage. And then the fifth stage arises, which is where you move out of the focus on the body to what is the withdrawal from the body, the senses, and you begin to try and attain control of your body through controlling your senses, which basically come down to the sight, hearing, touch, smell. Those are the main senses, and by not being distracted by those senses, which are connecting you to all the material physical world out there, you begin to be able to control your own self. And that's what the main focus is, to get control over your own self. And then you can, once you've got control over yourself, you can come back and start dealing with the external world in a proper way and see it for what it really is. So that's why get control over your body, get the right posture, get the right control over your breath and breathing, calm down the mind, and then you start to being able to withdraw the senses and stop being distracted by the external toys in the world. And then you can start to begin to get in concentration, which is the sixth stage, where you start to be able to concentrate your mind on a single thing. So now the external world's not distracting you. You can start to focus on a single thing. Usually the first thing you start on is candlelight. And then once that concentration's stabilized, you can start to begin meditation, which is the seventh stage. And that leads you on to the final stage, the eighth stage, which is self-realization, when you've got complete control over your mind and you can begin to surrender and let the mind go and yourself go completely, so that you are at one with the universe. There's no separation between you and anything else. And when you've truly attained that state, that is the highest state, that is samadhi. And that is what Patanjali was trying to achieve. And he basically codified what all these sadhus and gurus in the past were teaching with their ascetics and all that, but had never actually formalized it into a step-by-step process. He actually formalized it. So,
Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yuta Padakamalam Sri Guru Vaishnavanscha Sri Rupan Vandeham.
Okay, now great respects to Sri Prabhupada, who's the founder of the Krishna consciousness movement. That was his voice. He is the enlightened guru of the Hare Krishnas. And you heard him singing there in a kind of Sanskrit chant of great holiness and virtue. And he is that is the voice of somebody who has attained that samadhi, that final state of enlightenment. So that person has gone through the 8 stages to reach that total state of total peace and meditation and bliss, regardless of where they are or what they're doing. They've passed through the boundary, and they will not be reincarnating back on this earth unless by their own volition they decide to liberate other souls. So I just wanted you to hear the voice, the singing of somebody who had attained that state. So these 8 stages of yoga, basically one can break them down into 4 stages. The first 2 are those promises I told you about, the vows, where you're making a kind of mental decision about how you're going to live your life, and that has this certain amount of breath control needed for that, and a certain amount of mental concentration, and that's the beginning of the stage that you're working on. I'm using these charts here to show you where your focus is as you move towards a higher state of spiritual awareness. So that's where you are when you're just at the stage of taking your vows, to say, okay, I choose to live this way of life. And the second stage, the second part, is focused on the body, which is where we start looking at the asanas, the postures, and the breath, the prana. At that stage, your focus is clearly very much concentrated on the breath. It's also you're also trying to concentrate the mind to a slightly lesser extent. And there's this beginning, when you're beginning to do the postures, as you start to release those blocked energies from your weary body that's been misaligned and abused and filled full of toxic waste and stuff and toxic thoughts, etc. And as you start to release those negativities, then you start to begin to feel this, what is called the dissolution of the self. So you can see on that chart there, that's where we're looking at. So, and that's that feeling of bliss, where you're just at one with everything. There's no need to fight for anything or achieve anything or be angry with anyone or be depressed about anything, because you're it all. So as that's the second part, then the third part is where you're moving into that withdrawing of the senses and the beginning of the process of concentration, what's called pratyahara and dharana, and that's when you're focusing more on what I'd say the mind is, and there the breath still is important as you're beginning these processes, but you're not focused on it so much as you are on pranayama, and your main focus is on concentration on the mind. And the dissolution of the self starts to rise. This feeling of enlightenment or bliss starts to increase as you get into deeper states of meditation. And then the final stage is where you're at the stage of meditation, dhyana and samadhi, which is that state of absolute realization. And at that stage, the necessity of getting your breathing right becomes less important, concentration also becomes less important, and everything is focused on the dissolution of the self, of the surrender. But If you don't follow the step-by-step process, then you will, you might kid yourself that you've reached that dissolution of self, but it will not be the truth. So let's go on to how does Patanjali break these up. The first stage, we'll look at the first vow that you make, and that is called the Yamas, and the first lot of promises you make of restraints of things that you say that you won't do. And the first promise you make of the Yamas is called, in Sanskrit, it's called ahimsa, which you may have heard Gandhi. If you watched the movie Gandhi, they were always talking about ahimsa. Gandhi was always saying ahimsa, ahimsa, which is basically, the non-violent movement that he had for independence for India. It's all about, no, everyone else had violent revolutions to obtain their independence, but we're different in India. We're going to do it the right way. We're going to be non-violent in our attainment of our liberation. So that's why Gandhi, being a yogi, and he certainly was, followed Patanjali in following that first yama of Patanjali being ahimsa. So non-violence, doesn't mean you have to have a revolution to free yourself from the society. You can take it at a much more practical level of just don't think harmful thoughts. When you see yourself getting angry, stop yourself and question what you're doing. So anger is a violence. So this is the simple little things you can do every day in your life to bring peace. And if you really want to, surrender to this path of yoga, that's what you have to follow if you really want to make any headway. So whenever you see yourself getting anger arising, you're on the wrong track, and you just have to have that awareness of watching how you're thinking and how you're reacting to people. And when the anger comes, you reject it and you choose the path of peace. Even if other people are getting angry with you, you don't react to it. You see, okay, they're breaking ahimsa. They're already harming themselves, so me getting angry with them at their anger is utter stupidity. The best thing I can do is to try and calm them down. That's the most important thing, because they're causing harm to themselves by their anger. So ahimsa is not just dealing with violence towards other people or non-violence towards other people. It's also, it would be better said, rather than non-violence, to say bring love to the world and to other people. So through that, you're not just not getting angry, you're actually positively trying to bring kindness and happiness and generosity into people's lives, and also into your own life, because that non-violence also means you've got to make sure you don't, get angry with yourself or criticize yourself or say or think negative things about yourself. And that's really important. Otherwise, you will be inflicting violence on yourself, and not just in your thoughts about your actions and interactions, but in your actual postures while you're doing the yoga. So that when you do your bend in yoga, you do not force yourself and stretch yourself and bend and contort the spine, and push as hard as you can, which is how we're taught in the Western world when we're trying to compete in sports. It's not a sport, it's a spiritual practice. And you actually relax, breathing into the posture, and then that's when the muscle will surrender and allow you to go deeper into it. So if you're forcing yourself into postures, that is violence against yourself, you're going the wrong direction, you've got to ease back and relax into it. That's how you will succeed in yoga. Doesn't mean sometimes you do have to, make an effort and a determination and, be on that edge of pain as you're trying to do a stretch. Doesn't mean you sit and do nothing. So there's a fine line between what is harmful and what is good. So, and you've got to find that balance when you're doing your postures. And arguably, when you're even communicating with anybody on any subject, it's often, that's where the most productivity is achieved, is when you're in that edge of, it's that edge of learning, if you like, of it's too difficult, it's too challenging for me, and it's not challenging enough. So when you're on the balance between those two, the edge between the understanding and not understanding, then that's your space of learning. There's actually a term used for that that's escaped my mind. But that's where you're aiming at when you're doing your practices and when you're, practicing ahimsa, non-violence. So that's the most important thing in your restraints. And then the next second yama is called satya, which in Sanskrit means truth. And satya is a promise to be honest with your own thoughts, honest to other people, to not just tell the truth in a superficial way, but actually tell the truth in a deep, substantial way. So like, I'll give you an example of like a lawyer. Lawyers will know how important it is to superficially tell the truth. So they're very good at making sure that on the surface they tell the truth. But underneath, they'll manipulate and find every possible loophole so they can make it so their lie's concealed, while it still looks as if they're telling the truth. And they're brilliant at doing that, and that's how they make a lot of money. But that is still a lie. That is still being dishonest in yoga. So in yoga, it's not just truthfully telling something superficially while you're concealing, the substance of it, and you're doing that. If you know deep down that what you're doing is a lie, then it's a lie, and you come out and reveal the substance. You don't hide behind the superficiality of the truth like a lawyer does. So yoga goes 1,000,000 times deeper than the way the laws operate in our society. And that protects you. That means because you're telling it at a very deep level, you're going to protect yourself from when your little superficial truth is revealed and all the lies underneath start to reveal themselves and, start to shatter apart your life. So that is, in essence, satya. When you're following satya, you always put ahimsa first. So you don't tell the truth, insensitively, or use it as a weapon to hurt people because you want to get your own back. You are mindful in how you speak the truth. So you treat people with respect and you bear in mind what they can tolerate and what's going to cause them harm or not. So if telling the truth would really offend someone And, you know, we all know circumstances where you can be bluntly honest with somebody and it can, you know, shatter their you know, truth, whether it's a little kid who believes in Father Christmas comes down the chimney and, you know, you decide you're going to wreck his little fantasy that his parents have believed because, you know, Dad dresses up at Father Christmas and puts stockings. That is, you know, even though it's not true, you do not go and say to that kid, no, it's all fake. I'm telling Satya, I'm telling the truth. So, geez, I'm a good person for doing this. No, you are not, because you have not factored in ahimsa. You've not factored in the harm that's going to be caused to that child. And that's a very simple example, but you can use it across countless examples with everyone in every circumstance. So, but I think that gives you the general idea of, you know, how these yamas work at the different levels and how why ahimsa, why non-violence comes before truth. So let's move on to the third yama, which is asteya. Asteya is basically a restraint, which is don't take things which are not yours. Don't steal. That's a very superficial explanation of asteya. Or you can look at this at a little bit more of a subtle level. Don't take what is not offered to you. So if superficially you can just say, of course, if I don't own something and I take it, yes, of course that's wrong. But asteya goes deeper than that. Even if somebody comes up to you and offers you something that you know is, you know, going to be harmful for you or cause harm for other people, then ahimsa comes before that. It's higher up on the hierarchy. So you would say, oh yes, well, it is being offered to me. I'm not stealing it, but it's going to cause me harm. So I will not take it, you know. And also, if somebody offers you something that's stolen and it's gonna, you know, be make you dishonest by taking that stolen good, then you know, following Satya, the truth, you cannot, you know, go and accept what's being given to you, because along the way, it's not really been offered to you. It's been, you know, it's been stolen or something. That is kind of quite a sort of superficial kind of appraisal of what asteya means, because you can look at it at an even deeper level of just go inside yourself to focus on your highest truth and look into how you personally feel inside yourself about whether you're going to do something or not. And if you have to make choices in your life about things that appear, they may have no differing moral value in the choice, you know. Might be what I'm going to study. Am I going to study, you know, what am I going to do in my profession? What am I going to study for a career in my life? And you have to make a choice how to do that. Well, a yogi goes back inside himself and says, well, what is my higher truth here? What is the universal spirit telling me? What is really being offered to me for me to do in my career that is my dharma, to follow the rest of the life that will bring me supreme happiness? And it may be, you know, it may be, okay, go and do a yoga teacher training course, or, you know, go to India. Or it may be, no, what will really work for me and what I want to do is is to go and study medicine and help heal people, or, you know, be a nurse, or it may be, you know, like I'm really good at mechanics, I really want to, you know, become a mechanic. But that's the sort of level of truth you try and go inside yourself to determine if what the universe is giving to you and whether you can accept it or not. So that is another level when you're looking at this Yama of Asteya. So, next one, which often, this is a huge obstacle for people, especially in our libertine, promiscuous world that we have now, where we have the freedom to do whatever we want, marry whoever we want, whatever sex, whatever race, it's all open slather. So, this is one which always upsets people in, particularly in our Western countries now, and that is Brahmacarya. Brahmacarya, because the traditional view of Brahmacarya is celibacy. So if you follow the yoga, you do not think about sex, you do not have sex, you do not stimulate yourself in relation to sex, you throw that completely out of your life, and all you do is focus your mind on the meditation, enlightenment, on the higher, blissful, peaceful path. And that's how you, and when you surrender to do these kind of teachings under a guru, that's the promise that you've got to make to the guru. There's good reasons for that, because sexual energy is very powerful, and it can disrupt an ashram, you know, in psychically, through psychic energy, through telepathy and so on. So those kind of cities, as they call them, powers, have effects. So that's the reason why they make that strict rule in yoga ashrams. Especially as you go higher up the levels. But we are not, you know, in 2,000 years ago in India. So what is Brahmacharya for Western people? What does Brahmacharya really mean when we go to the core of it? Does it mean no sex? It's a restraint, it's a yama. If you, this is why I call this Ascension Tantra Yoga, because the basic energy of the human being is the Kundalini energy in the yoga system, and that's the energy that goes up the spine, and that's the energy that takes you to enlightenment. It's the energy that connects you from the physical world to the spiritual world, and that energy is ultimately in the yoga. It is sexual energy. It's all sexual energy. Sexual energy is what brought you into this existence. It's what keeps the human race going. It's what creates us. So it's the most powerful energy, and it is the energy of the Kundalini system. So we'll go into that in a little bit more detail later, but from the point of view of the Yama, Brahma is the creator. There's the creative force in Hinduism. There's Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, the Trinity, and Brahma creates, Vishnu preserves, and Shiva destroys and recreates. So Brahma is this creative sexual energy that that brings us into existence, that flows through us all the time, that flows through from our sexual organs right up to our brain. And Charya is like, really means kind of flow or movement. in Sanskrit. So it's this flow of the creative energy. That's what Brahmacarya really means. And so it's not actually saying no sex. It's saying we want the sexual energy to flow. And we want it to flow so that you attain that state of enlightened bliss, of self-realization. So you know truly who you are, which is being completely at one with this entire universe. Now, you still have a body, you still have your animal instincts and so forth, you still have your sexual energy and so forth, and your ability to reproduce. So it's really about using that sexual energy in a way that is the most blissful and productive and truthful and non-violent and beautiful, ecstatic ecstasy that you can experience, as is shown in those statues of Shiva and Parvati in sexual embrace, you know, which is center of Hindu worship. So that's the kind of union you can have with another human being that can bring you to that highest experience. So it doesn't mean no sex. Yes, you can have sex, but do it through the Tantra, do it through the yoga, do it in this proper way that's not abusive, not harmful, and you will meet the right person and you will connect with them to them the right way, following these yogic teachings, and it will give you the most loving and ecstatic and truthful relationship that you've ever had or experienced in your life. So that is really what Brahmacharya is about. Now, finally, the fifth yama. But in this sense, it's still a restraint. It doesn't mean, it's basically saying, use your sexual energy to flow up to enlightenment. So, but do not waste your sexual energy. Do not act abusively with your sexual energy. Following those other things. Ahimsa, do not be violent with your sexual energy. Satya, be truthful when you're using your sexual energy. Astaya, only take what's offered to you. Do not steal when you're using your sexual energy. And then you come up to Brahmacharya, which is then your sexual energy will flow right, will flow correctly. So this is an absolutely, brilliant system that, as far as I'm concerned, is the truth, is the ultimate truth for humanity. And it's one that drops all the guilt and of Christianity. Because within Christianity is the same thing, even in Islam and so forth. Christianity goes on endlessly, especially Paul, about the flesh and the spirit and overcoming the desires of the flesh and, giving that up for the spirit. But it all does it in this way that the flesh is something of Satan and evil, and creates this huge guilt complex in sexuality. And, with the Catholics having their priests who had to be celibate but it's all done in this simplistic kind of primitive way that doesn't really go to the truth of what's going on in our actual biological system. It's too caught up in Judaic mysticism. So that's why Christianity doesn't really work, and why most of those Catholic priests end up, child abusers, or many of them. So the brilliance of the yoga is it enters that sexual energy without all that guilt, without saying it belongs to the devil. So if you really go into the truth behind it, although a lot of Hinduism, etc., has been corrupted by Christianity and Islam and is full of Puritanism, but if you really go back to the essence, 1,000 years ago, the temples were all full of statues of naked people, many of them having sex, etc. It was all part of the religious experience. Khajuraho is just one of many temples in India which were like that, which the Muslims came in and hacked to bits. So, and the Christians under the English weren't much better. So that's your yamas.